If you like what I do, consider joining my channel or donating to my coffee. Links in the description.
Finally, inner peace.
Finally, AWAKEN Astral Blade is here. I've been awaiting its release for what seems like forever. I made a video last year of my most anticipated Metroidvanias, and AWAKEN Astral Blade hit number 2 on that list. I'll throw a card up top if you want to check that vid out yourself and see what made number 1. Needless to say, I was ecstatic to finally get my hands on AWAKEN Astral Blade. The game's part of PlayStation's China Hero project, where PlayStation works with China-based developers to help their games reach a global audience. The initiative has helped get many games across the finish line, with a couple I personally enjoyed. Anno Mutationum is a pretty slick and narrative-focused action game, and Fist Forged in Shadow Torch is a combat-heavy Metroidvania that plays itself a little too seriously, considering the main character is a bunny. But what's AWAKEN Astral Blade all about? You play as Tanya, a bionic, or super sophisticated android if you will, who's on a rescue mission. And while on this mission, she's there also to study some ancient ruins in the middle of a forest infected by a mysterious otherworldly energy crawling with hostile and dangerous mutants. And wouldn't you know it, things soon go awry and Tanya finds herself on an adventure full of conspiracies, troubling revelations, and self-discovery. What can I say? I'm a sucker for a cute bionic girl who can kick my ass. But is that enough to make AWAKEN Astral Blade a great Metroidvania?
Combat.
Man, there is so much to combat, I don't even know where to freaking start. I guess, firstly, there's a heavy emphasis on combat in AWAKEN Astral Blade, and secondly, and most importantly, combat is awesome. Tanya starts with a sword and eventually gets 2 other weapons, a scythe, God I love scythes, and limited projectiles called gleaming darts. Each weapon comes with a different attack speed, power, and range, so choosing the weapon suitable for the situation or to your playstyle is a key strategy. And you can change weapons on the fly with the press of a trigger button, even during combos, which felt awesome. Combos are a pretty big deal in this game, so bear with me as I get all this information out. Each weapon has a standard 3-hit ground combo and 2-hit air combo, but these combos can be altered if you press the energy burst button after the 2nd or 3rd strike. So attack, attack, attack looks like this, and attack, attack, energy burst looks like this. You ever play Dynasty Warriors? It feels like that. When you press the energy burst button, you'll cap off the combo with a special move. Special moves are powerful and cost nothing to use. But there's even more to Tanya's deadly repertoire. See this blue halo effect that happens after the energy burst attack? Switch your weapon at this point and you'll pull off another attack as well as switch your weapon. And these attacks are crucial to your survival as Tanya is invulnerable while she does them. That sounds broken, but pulling these attacks off during boss fights requires a lot of patience and skill, so it evens out in the end. Tanya also has an energy bar that, once filled, allows her to pull off a finishing move, a super powerful attack that also provides iframes. So utilizing finishers can be the difference between victory or death. Of course, you don't start with all these weapons and abilities. I just wanted to show off what our little bionic is capable of. She also has some defensive capabilities at her disposal in the form of a dash and a parry. The dash gives you iframes unless certain conditions are present, like homing projectiles or electricity, and parrying is freaking hard to do. But that could just be a skill issue. I am just terrible at parrying. But if you want to be successful, you better learn how to parry or dodge at just the right moment, because this is how you activate the game's best feature, battle awareness. Or for you old heads out there, bullet time, or just slow-mo in simplest terms. Once battle awareness procs, time essentially stands still for a second or two, depending on how you leveled it up. More on that in the progression section. And with time frozen, you can just absolutely wail on your opponent. It's such an amazing feeling. There are other advantages battle awareness gives you, such as hormone stacking, which is a buff that does all sorts of things that I'll let you discover. It just goes to show that combat in Awaken Astral Blade is very robust and, in turn, very engaging. I think one of my favorite aspects of combat is this feature where if you press the energy burst button upon killing an enemy, they'll drop 50% more ether, this game's currency. I found that to be a brilliant way to reward players who fully engage with the game's combat. Now, a cool and beefy combat system is only as great as the enemies you can take down while using it. And the enemies in Awaken Astral Blade are very few in variety. Enemies are all over the place, don't get me wrong. You'll be hacking and slashing a good 80 to 90% of the time during your playthrough. Don't worry about that. My critique here is that I wish there were more enemy types. Some biomes have unique enemies, but most share the same mutants and you'll become very familiar with them real quick. And even a couple of the bosses repeat, though they do add twists and reskins so they're not completely rehashed. As for the bosses in general, I thought they were pretty good, though I found a few of them to be very challenging. You really have to focus if you want to take some of these guys down. And by that I mean, get good with the parry and dash so you can activate battle awareness. That slow-mo will absolutely trash those bosses once you get their moves down. So yes, I found Awaken Astral Blade to be a pretty challenging game, but fret not, there are difficulty settings for those who want them. I replayed the game a little using the story mode difficulty setting, and it made the game so much easier. And you can change the difficulty whenever you want once you unlock the cat shrine. More on that later. The last thing I want to bring up is the blood bottles, this game's Estus flasks. I'll go deeper into them in the progression section, but I wanted to talk about them a little in the combat section because, well, they're vital to combat. You start with 3 bottles, they restore a set amount of HP when used, and they recharge at resting points, just like a Souls-like. So the question is Awaken Astral Blade a Soulsvania? I'd say yes, but maybe a Soulsvania-like. Please don't call it that. I'm just messing around. Awaken Astral Blade is challenging, has rechargeable healing items, and uses the exploring an ancient and ruined civilization trope that's prevalent in Souls-likes. But there's no corpse running or any punishment upon death that would hinder your exploration, which is exactly what I like to see in my MVs. And that's it for combat, which was a lot. Tanya gets 3 weapons she can switch on the fly. She has a bevy of combos that are as effective as they are cool looking. Battle awareness is so freaking fun, and all this packaged in a challenging game with difficulty options so more people can enjoy it. This is some very solid stuff.
Abilities, platforming.
Outside of Tanya's impressive and extensive combat skills, her unlockable traversal abilities are either bland or just glorified keys. Tanya starts with a dash to evade enemies and a running dash, and she eventually gets a double jump, a situational wall jump, a ground pound, and the much more interesting bounce jump. The bounce jump is a variation on the standard MV high jump that involves Tanya slamming into the ground with an attack and then bouncing high into the sky. Bounce jumping is fun to do during exploration and combat, and is used in some very challenging platforming sections. Platforming in Awaken Astral Blade is surprisingly good. First off, Tanya's movements feel great, fluid, and responsive. And secondly, she's pretty dang fast, making her movement feel that much better. The moment-to-moment platforming is fine enough, but the game likes to sporadically throw challenges and puzzles at you. As for puzzles, there's no real brain busters here, but they do involve thoughtful observation and can at times make you feel smart for figuring them out. And the platforming challenges can be real doozies. Finding some of the more hidden stuff in the game can really test your skills. Getting a couple of seeds for the seed side quest had me guessing my own platforming skills. But once I figured it out, it wasn't too difficult to execute. That's it for this section. Most of Tanya's unlockable abilities are just kinda okay, with the bounce jump being a highlight. There's also another skill you can unlock that's entirely missable. It's really fun to use and necessary to have in order to complete a side quest, so you have to keep your eyes peeled at all times in this game. And platforming, by and large, felt great because controlling Tanya felt so good.
Progression.
Progression is another area where Awaken Astral Blade feels very Souls-like. There are no stats, builds, or customizable gear, and there are only the default weapons, so don't expect any enemy loot drops. But its quote-unquote leveling system is kinda Soulsy, in that the currency enemies drop can be used at shops and to level up your skills. Okay, let me back it up a bit. The currency in this game is called Ether, and you can find it all over the place. By killing enemies, by popping open pustules, or by simply running and grabbing it like this were a mascot platformer. This crap is all over the place. You take this Ether and use it for everything. Buying stuff at a shop, unlocking skills in your skill trees, or upgrading your weapon. You have a couple of skill trees to consider. an active skill tree for your abilities, and a passive one for general stats and stuff. I'm not going to go over everything in these trees, but definitely study them before dropping your hard-earned ether. I highly recommend updating anything related to battle awareness ASAP, because that's how you're going to win at this game on normal difficulty. Oh, and there's an ether acquisition stat you should increase immediately too, obviously. As for upgrading weapons, that's going to take ether and a specific collectible called Carpus Alloy. Each weapon has 4 levels, and each level has unique attributes you can unlock. As you can see, there's a lot of player expression just in how you spend your ether. But that's not all for player expression. There are also ornaments Tanya can equip. These are modifications like Hollow Knight's charms, and each ornament's effect varies wildly and can actually go a long way in making AWAKEN Astral Blade feel like it has builds. And like Hollow Knight's charms, Tanya only has so much space to equip these mods. And there's an item you can collect that gives you more space, not unlike Hollow Knight's notches. The last piece of player expression comes in Tanya's costumes. There are 3 alternate costumes to unlock, each providing some kind of boost or buff. I'm not going to spoil how to unlock these costumes. All I'll say is unlocking them is not as easy as purchasing them with ether. As far as side quests go, there are only a few, and nearly all of them are game spanning. 90% of these side quests can be initiated at the game's hub village, and a few of them reward you as you collect and find what you need to collect and find. These are my favorite kinds of side quests, so I didn't mind that there was so few quests to do. There's one NPC at the village that'll upgrade your healing potion if you bring it the right materials. And trust me when I say, you're gonna need these healing potions to be as powerful as you can get them. And that'll do it for progression. Though there's no traditional leveling system, there's still a lot of player expression, and it all depends on how you spend your ether. Progression can seem slow at first, but if you recall from the combat section, if you hit the energy burst button upon killing something, it boosts the ether you get by 50%. So I didn't really have an issue with leveling up Tanya at a comfortable pace.
Exploration.
Exploration in AWAKEN Astral Blade is incredibly rewarding. I don't think there's a single screen or area where you can't find at least 1 or 2 things. Ether pustules, ornaments, Carpus Alloy, alien crystals, golden octopuses that increase your attack, moon fruits that increase your HP, flask flowers, lore items, key items, side quest items, cats. There really is a ton of stuff to find while you're running around and slaughtering mutants. If there's a darkened spot on the map that you haven't explored, there's a very good chance there's something there waiting to be discovered. Speaking of the map, it's fine. It's not very detailed, but it does its job. It automatically marks up points of interest like save points, shops, and NPCs with side quests, and you can mark it up however you please. And you better be marking this map up, because there's a lot of backtracking you need to do if you want to get this game's true ending. But if you're only interested in the game's critical path, it's easy to follow because the game always marks your current objective. Moreover, the game's world is relatively straightforward, so it's incredibly difficult to get lost. With the exception of a couple of biomes, there's no winding corridors or labyrinthine level designs. You might be overwhelmed by how large an area is, but you definitely won't get lost. That's not to say the game's completely linear. There are plenty of times you can explore off the beaten path, but typically, these paths tend to be forks in the road that lead to wherever you were intending to go anyway. So they're less likely to be off the beaten path and more likely to be alternate paths. Okay, let's talk about the game's exploratory pacing, if that's even a thing. It took me about 4 hours to get to a point where the game truly opened into an interconnected world with guided nonlinearity. If you don't mind me throwing around some official terminology like a real games reviewer. In the game's opening hours, I was really afraid it might not actually be a Metroidvania with how linear it was. It comes across as almost level-based at first, but rest assured, AWAKEN Astral Blade is a Metroidvania. It just takes 1/3 of its runtime to get there. After the first few hours, you're finally introduced to the game's hub village and given multiple paths to choose from. Once you complete the objective that required you to choose from these multiple paths, the game's critical path becomes linear again until you complete it, with its true path offering up optional scenarios via backtracking, so again, make sure you mark up that map. Speaking of backtracking, a little after the game opens up into a Metroidvania proper, you'll be given a fast travel ability that allows you to instantly teleport to all discovered save points, which is my favorite form of fast travel because it makes fast travel so much easier and efficient. The main reason you'll be backtracking is to find stuff you may have missed, so don't expect biomes to hide entrances to other biomes or anything intriguing like that. Biomes in this game feel like standard levels in a platformer, though revisiting them with unlocked abilities will always be fruitful. One thing I really appreciate in MVs is when devs give you tools to help 100% a game. And the devs' tool of choice for this task? Cats. There's a cat shrine you can find outside the hub village, and at the shrine you can toggle a few very helpful options such as changing the game's difficulty or having the cats meow when you enter an area with items you haven't discovered yet. You can also have the cats show every undiscovered item on the map if you find all the cats. Unlocking these options was an outstanding reward for thorough exploration. And that does it for exploration. It takes the game a while before it relinquishes the reins, but once it does, it's a pretty good time. If you like finding stuff while exploring, Awaken Astral Blade has you covered. There's just so much to find while you're running around, I'm hard pressed to think of an MV that's as rewarding off the top of my head.
Atmosphere, narrative.
Man, it feels weird placing both of these attributes in a single section for Awaken Astral Blade, because atmosphere and narrative are the game's greatest strength and weakness, respectively. Let's start with the atmosphere. This game is freaking gorgeous. Every area in this game feels and looks thoughtfully designed. There is so much creativity and detail in every single environment. It's mind-blowing. I want to say not a single background was reused, like every environment was personally hand-drawn or something. There were so many times when I was rendered speechless by how cool some of these backgrounds looked. There are these huge statues at the beginning of the game that captured my imagination, a lake with mushrooms that had me in awe, and just so many backgrounds with a beautiful moon hanging in the distance. This game is absolutely gorgeous and a delight to look at in nearly every frame. I don't have much to say about the music, which isn't unusual for me. I thought the music was fine and did what it had to do when it had to do it. Upbeat battle music for bosses, surreal synths for creepy and mysterious moments, stuff like that. Nothing exceptionally memorable, but it did its job. As for the narrative, well, I'll start with this. The story is creative with a world and history I was genuinely interested in and would like to know more about, but the characters could have used a bit more fleshing out. I thought the relationship between Tanya and Sithna was a bit forced and not explored enough, so the impact of some decisions weren't very impactful. And though the game's world was interesting, the world building and delivery was not. In true Souls-like fashion, a lot of the game's history and story is revealed through lore items and item descriptions. But to the devs' credit, they also have an actual character-based tale to tell, and I loved that. But this was a double-edged sword because telling a character-based tale requires dialogue and story beats, and these were not Awaken Astral Blade's strongest attributes. I don't know if it was the localization issue or the, at times, poor English voice acting.
If there were to be intermarriage between us over time, they will tarnish the noble bloodline of enchanters, eroding the clan.
But it was difficult to follow along without the help of the lore items and such keeping me grounded. There's also a lot of tropes and a couple of predictable twists that prevent this story from reaching new heights, but in the end, I 100% loved the true ending and was happy I got it. I found the path to getting this true ending to be logical, interesting, and fun. And that does it for this section. Awaken Astral Blade is an incredibly beautiful game with a decent story. Though I wish more time was spent fleshing out certain characters and relationships, I really dug the world the game takes place in. Lots of cool history and exposition to take in.
Final thoughts and score.
If you're into fast-paced, challenging combat with some depth, and rewarding exploration with a lot of collectibles, Awaken Astral Blade is definitely worth a look. Visually, the game's a stunner. Each biome feels lovingly crafted with incredible attention to detail. The narrative, though, could have used some more work, especially with character development. But the game's world and lore were compelling enough to keep me invested. I award Awaken Astral Blade a 7.5 out of 10. Awaken Astral Blade is available on PC and PlayStation 5. I played it on the Steam Deck with 0 issues and am giving it a Steam Deck rating of verified.
Tier placement.
AWAKEN Astral Blade has some powerful strengths and some glaring weaknesses. It has a robust combat system with exciting features like battle awareness and weapon switching. Additionally, the stunning visuals and meticulously designed biomes create a rich and immersive atmosphere that keeps players captivated. However, the game falls short in a few key areas. The lack of enemy variety hampers the game's replayability, and the underdeveloped narrative and character relationships leave a lot to be desired. The dialogue and voice acting don't quite match the quality of the gameplay and visuals, making it harder to get fully invested in the story. While exploration is highly rewarding, the game has a slow start, and it takes a few hours before it fully opens up into a more traditional Metroidvania experience. This may discourage some players early on, but stick with it as it does improve once the world becomes more interconnected. AWAKEN Astral Blade becomes self-aware in the B tier. AWAKEN Astral Blade delivers a good Metroidvania experience and is a solid entry for genre fans who especially enjoy combat-heavy gameplay and beautiful visuals. It'd be in your best interest if you became aware of how good this game is.